The world feels quieter after so many storms, but it's the kind of quiet that makes your skin itch. The dead still roam, yet the living have learned to move around them like weather. We don't call it peace. We call it the pause before the next punishment. Our communities are stitched together by exhaustion and stubborn love. The crops grow thinner, the patrol routes grow longer. The small victory bursaries, one working generator, 1 week without a raid, one night where children sleep without jolting awake, feels sacred. But every leader can read the same truth in the faces of their people. This is not sustainable. A distant rumor moves faster than any walker heard. It starts as a whisper between traders, then it becomes a story told around fires. A civilization, not a camp, not a fortified town held together with salvaged metal and prayers. A real city with structure, uniforms, and enough stability to pretend the apocalypse is just a bad memory. The idea is so dangerously beautiful that it divides us before we even see it. Some want to chase it, desperate for order. Others want to bury the thought, convinced that any world big enough to promise safety is big enough to demand obedience. So we do what survivors always do, when hope might get them killed. We investigate. A small scouting group moves out at dawn, traveling light, keeping distance from main roads, letting the dead pass like drifting smoke. The journey is a quiet test of faith. Every abandoned house is a reminder of what the old world became. Every rusted car holds the ghost of normal life. Then we find it. Not the city, not yet, but the proof that the rumor has bones. A scavenged transit station sits half collapsed by vines and time. Inside, under debris and old posters bleached by the sun, there's a wall map. Someone has marked it recently with red ink. Clean lines, deliberate routes, clear intentionality. The ink is too bright to be ancient. The handwriting is steady, confident, almost arrogant. At the center of the marked web is one name, Commonwealth. The map hits our group like a silent explosion. In this world, paper is a kind of power. A map isn't just guidance, it's a promise that someone organized the chaos and survived long enough to plan beyond tomorrow. We fold it carefully, protect it like an infant, and head back. The return is tense. We keep expecting ambushes or the dead in numbers too thick to pierce. But the threat arrives in a form none of us can mistake. Boot prints, fresh, uniform, in formation. By the time we see them, we already hear them. The rhythmic crush of many feet moving as one. A line of soldiers appears across the tree line, helmets shining faintly through the leaves. Their weapons are clean. Their posture is not the desperate slump of survival. It is discipline. For a moment, we freeze in something close to awe. It feels impossible. Then one of them raises a hand, not to fire, but to halt the entire unit in perfect unison. A polite gesture in a brutal world. But politeness can be its own kind of weapon. We exchange glances that say the same thing. We can't know if this is rescue or conquest. The soldier who steps forward speaks with calm authority. Not a threat, not a plea, an invitation. And as we stand there holding the map like a fragile secret, we realize we may not have discovered the Commonwealth. The Commonwealth may have just discovered us. Hope is a dangerous drug, and the Commonwealth knows exactly how to administer it. The soldiers don't rush us. They don't bark orders the way bandits do. Their calm is almost more unsettling than aggression. They offer water, medical checks, and a controlled route to safety. The words are careful, official, practiced. We follow because the alternative is to reject the first real structure we've seen in years and walk back into hunger with pride as our only meal. The entry is ceremonial in its own quiet way. Gates, watchtowers, patrol lanes that overlap like a chessboard. The city rises beyond the walls with a scale that feels unreal. Apartment blocks, functioning streetlights, real supply lines. The living move through it with a kind of relaxed routine that looks impossible in a world still crawling with the dead. Even the air feels different here. Less smoke, less desperation. We are escorted through checkpoints and into an intake facility that looks almost like a hospital crossed with a government office. The fluorescent lighting is harsh, but the floors are clean. That alone feels like a miracle. Then they hand us paperwork. It's a simple gesture, but it lands like a hammer. A thick packet of intake forms with names, ages, medical history, skill assessments, family classifications. There are boxes for previous occupations, lines for primary utility value, and a section that asks which leaders in our group hold authority. We stare at the words as if they might bite, because we've lived in a world where power was taken by force. Here, power is categorized, recorded, and assigned. We fill them out anyway. One by one, we move into interviews. A soft-voiced administrator asks about engineering experience. A stern officer asks about combat training. A cheerful clerk asks about culinary skills, like the world never ended. Some of our people soften under the attention. They've been starving for normality for so long that they almost forget to be suspicious. Others stay stone-faced. We are separated into temporary housing, assigned wrist identifiers, and given a citizen handbook that reads like a promise wrapped around a warning. It outlines curfews, behavioral expectations, the chain of command. There are phrases like community harmony and reassignment procedures that feel too neat for something that could destroy a life. In the following days, the Commonwealth performs its finest magic trick. It shows us what we lost: warm meals, shower water that doesn't smell like rust, children playing without a weapon within arm's reach. But the magic has a cost. We notice cameras. We notice quiet patrols positioned at intersections where nothing seems wrong. We notice the subtle way people lower their voices when someone in armor passes by. And we notice how quickly the city begins making decisions about us. A few of our strongest fighters are offered positions in security. A skilled medic receives immediate access to better resources. A leader who resists questions is flagged for repeated interviews. The system doesn't shout, it sorts. As night falls, I sit with the completed forms in my hands and feel a chill. I can't blame on weather. These pages are not just information, they're leverage. In the old world, you proved your worth by surviving. In this one, you prove your worth by fitting the shape they've decided you should be. I sign my name anyway because in a broken world, you learn to bargain with uncertainty. But as the ink dries, a quiet thought settles like a blade behind my ribs. If this is the price of peace, then the war that follows will be fought over identity, not territory. And the Commonwealth already has our names in writing. The Commonwealth is bright enough to make you forget you ever lived in the dark. Morning arrives with a routine that feels almost scripted. Uniformed workers sweep streets, food stalls open on schedule. Children line up for lessons like the world was never ripped apart. The city doesn't just function. It performs the illusion of normal life with the confidence of something that believes it has outlived apocalypse itself. We're given tours that are polite and perfectly curated. Every stop is a reminder of what we lost and what we might regain. Apartments with intact windows, clinics stocked with medicine, a small stadium where people gather for games, cheering as if cheering alone might keep the dead away. But comfort always has seams. The first crack is silence. When we ask regular citizens about the leadership or the military, the answers are cautious, rehearsed. They speak about gratitude and security, but their eyes drift toward the nearest soldier before their sentences end. The second crack is separation. Our group is quietly divided into assessment lanes. Some of us get fast-tracked into desirable roles. Others are placed under extra review. The explanation is always simple, standard procedure. The reality feels more surgical. And then there's the observation, the constant, invisible pressure of being watched. We see cameras tucked into street corners. We feel the weight of patrols that appear whenever a conversation grows tense. We notice how swiftly a small argument is diffused by an officer who smiles like a therapist but stands like a jailer. At night, in our temporary quarters, people debate in whispers. One faction sees salvation. A stable society means our kids could grow up without learning how to kill before they learn how to read. Another faction sees a polished cage, a place that keeps you alive while slowly deciding who you are allowed to be. I find myself stuck between both truths, because the Commonwealth doesn't look like evil, it looks like competence. That's what makes it dangerous. A sympathetic resident slips into our orbit, someone who speaks with the cautious urgency of a person who has survived the system by studying its blind spots. They tell us about disappearances, about reassignment, about how people who question too loudly are moved into service roles that swallow their identities. We don't have proof yet, so we start looking for it. In a supply office near the intake center, one of our people discovers a ledger left momentarily unsecured. It's neat, typed, and clinical, a document that reduces human lives to categories: Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3. Underneath, notes about compliance potential, leadership influence, and risk behavior. A few names are already listed. Ours. The realization is cold and immediate. We aren't guests, we're being processed. We copy what we can, careful with time, careful with noise. We put the ledger back exactly as we found it, like returning a weapon to a sleeping enemy's bedside. Later, a carefully staged celebration ignites the streets. Music, lights, speeches about unity. The governor's name is mentioned like a blessing. We stand in the crowd with the uncomfortable sensation of being both audience and exhibit. The city is showing us what it wants us to see, but the ledger showed us what it truly is. As we return to our quarters, a soldier steps out of the shadows with a gentle smile and a direct gaze that feels like a searchlight. He asks our names again, not because he doesn't know, because he wants us to understand that he does. And as the night closes in, it becomes clear that the Commonwealth isn't just measuring our skills. It is measuring our willingness to be shaped. Power in the Commonwealth wears a clean suit and speaks softly enough to sound reasonable. We're invited to a formal meeting inside a government building that smells of polished wood and controlled history. The halls are lined with framed photographs of a restored civilization, smiling citizens, ceremonial events, uniformed soldiers standing beside bright banners. The images don't just celebrate survival, they reinterpret it. This is the kind of place that doesn't merely govern the present. It edits the past. We are introduced to the public face of the Commonwealth's leadership, figures who speak in calm, layered language about security, prosperity, and rebuilding. Then the atmosphere shifts subtly, like a door closing behind you without a sound. Lance Hornsby enters with the ease of a man who knows every room belongs to him before he even steps inside. He's not loud. He doesn't need to be. His charm is a blade wrapped in velvet. He praises our resilience, mentions our victories, lists our communities, like he's been studying us for months, which we realize he probably has. Then he presents the offer: a partnership, resources, protection, a place within the Commonwealth's growing sphere. But the language is calculated. This isn't a handshake. It's an acquisition strategy disguised as gratitude. He speaks about expansion as if it's inevitable, as if history is a river and the Commonwealth is simply the strongest current. We push back carefully, trying to find the line between diplomacy and defiance. He responds with a smile that never reaches his eyes. The next day, we see exactly how the Commonwealth maintains its stability. A citizen is publicly reprimanded for disrupting community harmony. The crowd watches in uncomfortable silence. The punishment is measured, almost bureaucratic, delivered with official phrases that make cruelty sound like maintenance. This is control refined into procedure. Back in our quarters, the division in our group deepens. Some argue we should accept the deal for the sake of our people. Others insist that any peace built on submission will rot us from the inside out. The debate isn't theoretical anymore, because Lance doesn't just want our agreement. He wants our signature. He returns with a stamped, formal expansion decree. The paper is thick, the ink official. The document names our communities and outlines the mutual benefits of integration. It also includes a line that chills the room. The Commonwealth reserves the right to implement military enforcement if regional stability is threatened. Threatened by who? By us. The implication is clear. Consent is preferable, but force is already prepared. We hesitate, and in that hesitation, Lance's expression softens into something almost amused, like he's watching a child struggle to understand that the game was decided before the dice were rolled. He says there are other leaders out there, other settlements that will accept the offer quickly. He doesn't say it as a threat. He says it as a reminder that we are not the center of his plans. We are just one route on his map. That night, a quiet warning arrives from within the city itself. A short note slipped under our door, written in hurried, nervous handwriting. 3 words: don't sign anything. We stare at the message as if it might catch fire, because now the choice in front of us isn't just about resources, it's about identity. We can accept order and risk becoming a polished version of someone else's empire, or we can refuse and invite a war that will be fought not just with weapons, but with the ink of laws written to erase us. The Commonwealth doesn't conquer you with violence first. It conquers you with relief. Days pass and the city starts feeling less like a strange dream and more like a dangerous possibility. We're assigned preliminary roles, temporary work, orientation shifts, small responsibilities that create the illusion of belonging. The system is elegant in how it softens resistance. It doesn't demand loyalty outright. It invites gratitude until gratitude becomes habit. Some of our people begin to smile again. They eat full meals and talk about tomorrow with a tone that feels almost innocent. A few even start dressing in the Commonwealth's clean, standardized clothing, not as surrender, but as comfort. For them, it's simple. If civilization still exists, why not step into it? But beneath the bright surface, a shadow economy breathes. A quiet contact, an ordinary resident with careful eyes, draws us into the city's underside. They don't speak like a revolutionary. They speak like someone who has learned how to survive inside a polished illusion. We meet in dim utility corridors and storage rooms that aren't part of the official tours. We hear about people reassigned after asking the wrong questions. We hear about compliance reviews that never end. We hear words that don't appear in the citizen handbook. Blacklists, leverage, erasure. Then comes the first real disappearance. A mild, well-liked citizen, someone who publicly questioned a policy during a community forum, simply stops showing up. Their apartment is emptied quickly. Their neighbors talk in half sentences. The official explanation is vague. Relocation, family reasons, staffing needs. The city says it with the confidence of a machine that expects you to accept any answer it prints. We don't accept it. We start gathering clues. Not weapons, not ammo, paper. In a community office, one of our group finds a stack of unsent complaint letters that were never filed into public record. The handwriting varies wildly, young, old, nervous, furious, but the message is consistent. People are vanishing into the system's blind spots. The letters describe midnight visits, sudden job transfers, and interviews that feel more like interrogations. The most terrifying part isn't the accusations, it's the desperation. Because these are citizens who once believed the Commonwealth was their shield. Now they're begging to be heard by a bureaucracy that has learned how to silence screams with stamps. We copy the letters and hide them. The act feels like theft, but also like duty. In this new world, evidence might be the only weapon that can survive a gunfight without losing its meaning. Meanwhile, Lance Hornsby's presence grows heavier. He appears at our assignments with the friendly timing of a man who has read our schedules. He offers small favors, better housing for a family here, extra rations there. He compliments our resilience with an intimacy that feels invasive. He doesn't sound like someone courting allies. He sounds like someone pricing assets. I watch our group fracture in microscopic ways. A glance that lingers too long on a luxury. A leader who begins to soften under the weight of responsibility. A fighter who suddenly imagines a life where they don't have to bleed to prove they deserve to live. The Commonwealth is winning the quiet war, not by breaking us, by tempting us to break ourselves. Late one night, as I reread one of the hidden letters, a realization hits with the certainty of cold water. This city isn't afraid of chaos. It's afraid of truth. Because truth is the one contagion they can't disinfect without exposing the weakness of the whole structure. I tuck the letters away, feeling the shape of a rebellion forming before we've even named it. And at the end of the hallway, a pair of soldiers pause outside our door, silent, patient, listening like the future depends on what we say next. The first time the Commonwealth asks for our obedience, it doesn't sound like a command. It sounds like an opportunity. We're invited to a formal gathering in a sleek, administrative hall where the lighting is soft and the banners are crisp. The space is designed to reassure this is civilization restored. The people running it aren't warlords, they're professionals. Lance Hornsby enters with that same effortless confidence, the kind that feels harmless until you realize it's a strategy. He speaks of our journey here with admiration. He references our communities with familiarity. He praises our leadership as if we've already proven ourselves worthy of trust. Then he shifts the conversation. He describes the Commonwealth not as a city, but as a growing network of stability, an expanding architecture of order. He says the world outside is too fractured to survive alone. He says unity is inevitable, and he says we have a chance to be part of that inevitability. The offer arrives on paper, a formal expansion decree, stamped and dated, outlining mutual protection, resource sharing, and a structured pathway for our communities to integrate into Commonwealth systems. It reads like a contract between equals until you notice the phrasing buried in the middle. A clause about security guarantees, a line about strategic oversight, another about enforcement measures to preserve regional harmony. The words are polite, the meaning is not. We push back with careful questions. We ask about representation, autonomy, the right to refuse policies that don't align with our values. Lance answers smoothly, but never precisely. He speaks in the language of diplomacy that keeps doors open while quietly narrowing your options. Outside the hall, we witness a moment that clarifies everything. A public disciplinary action, small in scale, huge in symbolism. A citizen is reprimanded for doing something that shouldn't be dangerous, criticizing a policy. The punishment is framed as corrective. The crowd watches with that particular kind of fear that pretends to be normalcy. This is how order stays clean. It removes the mess before anyone can name it. Back in our quarters, the debate becomes a storm. Some of our people argue that signing could bring relief to thousands. Children could eat. The sick could be treated. The dead could become an afterthought. Others say the decree is not a partnership. It's a noose that tightens slowly enough to feel like a necklace. I stand between them with a truth that cuts both ways. Our people deserve peace, but not at the cost of becoming a sanctioned extension of someone else's empire. Lance returns sooner than expected. He doesn't act impatient. He doesn't need to. He lays the decree out again, and this time the subtext is louder. He mentions other communities, other leaders who are already considering the benefits. He says the Commonwealth can't wait forever for consensus. He isn't threatening us with violence. He's threatening us with irrelevance. In the Commonwealth's worldview, history belongs to those who move first. We hesitate, and he smiles the way a man smiles when he knows your hesitation is already a victory. That night, a folded slip of paper appears under our door. No seal, no signature, just a hurried warning scrawled in plain ink. Don't sign anything. The message is short, but it lands with the force of a siren. Because now it's clear the real war won't start on a battlefield. It will start at a table with a pen in our hand and the future waiting to see whether we choose survival or sovereignty. By now, the Commonwealth has learned our rhythm. It knows which of us are restless, which are hungry for stability, which are quietly mapping escape routes in our minds. And it responds the way a sophisticated machine responds to a variable it can't fully control, by applying pressure so gently that it feels like persuasion. The tours continue, but the tone subtly changes. We're no longer being shown the miracle. We're being shown the expectation. A soldier escorts us through a training yard where recruits move in synchronized drills, their armor bright, their weapons standardized. The message is silent but sharp. This is what functional power looks like. This is what you become when you stop improvising survival and start serving a system. Meanwhile, inside our group, the fractures widen. A few of our people are offered accelerated placement, better housing, higher rations, roles near central administration. The Commonwealth paints these offers as recognition of merit, but the pattern is too clean to be coincidence. The ones being rewarded are the ones most likely to influence the rest of us. Lance Hornsby doesn't need to threaten anybody. He just needs to make obedience feel like a smart career move. Across the city, the undercurrent of dissent grows louder. We reconnect with the resident who warned us before, and they lead us through the less curated Commonwealth. The forgotten corridors behind supply hubs, the cramped dorms where lower-tier workers share space with exhausted silence. Here, the story is different. People talk about the placement ceiling, about how promotions are political, not earned, about how the system doesn't destroy dreams, it repackages them into loyalty. A nurse tells us about a colleague who questioned a resource allocation decision and was abruptly reassigned to hazardous perimeter duty. No trial, no appeal, just paperwork that makes disappearance look like employment. We begin to understand the Commonwealth's true genius. It weaponizes process. We plan to gather proof, not rumor, not emotion, something official. One of our team, quiet, patient, and good at becoming invisible, gets access to a records room under the excuse of assisting with logistics. We move in pulses, one person distracting a clerk, another scanning shelves, a third watching the hallway for armor. The files are neatly labeled, efficient, cold, and then we find it, an internal memo stamped with administrative clearance. The document outlines regional integration prospects, listing multiple settlements beyond the Commonwealth walls. Next to each one, population estimates, resource profiles, leadership influence ratings. The language is clinical but unmistakably predatory. We are not being invited. We are being evaluated for acquisition. Worse, the memo includes a projection timeline, dates, phases, contingency actions. The final section is the most chilling, a recommendation that high-risk leadership groups be neutralized through internal destabilization prior to public annexation. It's not just expansion, it's a chess match. We copy the memo in fragments using handwritten duplicates and a small camera salvaged from old-world tech. The plan is to create redundancies, paper, memory, and digital, so the truth can survive even if one method is destroyed. But the moment we leave, the city shifts. A patrol stops us for a routine identity confirmation. Their politeness is too precise, their timing too perfect. One soldier casually asks about our assignments, our locations, our day. It sounds conversational. It isn't. We keep our faces neutral. We answer just enough to be believable. We move on with careful steadiness. Back in our quarters, the memo sits between us like a live grenade. It confirms everything we feared. The Commonwealth isn't offering us a future, it's drafting our surrender. We debate options under the weight of the ticking clock. Do we expose the document now and risk a crackdown, or do we coordinate with our outside communities first and prepare a unified response? A messenger arrives from within the city's lower-tier districts. No speech, no introduction, just a single sentence whispered like prayer. They're planning to move sooner than you think. That night, I can't sleep, because the real danger is no longer the dead in the streets. It's the living behind desks, writing our fate in ink before we even get a chance to refuse. The Commonwealth's greatest weapon is not its army. It's the way it makes time feel like it belongs to them. After the memo, everything accelerates. The city remains calm on the surface. Markets open, children laugh, speeches continue. But the security presence tightens in subtle increments. Patrols double at administrative zones. Checkpoints appear at intersections that never needed them before. The system is preparing for turbulence, and we suspect it already knows we are the cause. We decide to warn our home communities immediately. A coded message is drafted in plain language that won't raise suspicion if intercepted. We embed the urgent details inside a routine supply request format, numbers that look like inventory but are actually dates and risk levels. It's a trick from the old world of survival. When your enemy owns communication, you make your truth look boring. A sympathetic clerk helps route the message through a scheduled medical transport. This is the moment where hope becomes action, and action becomes risk. At the same time, Lance Hornsby intensifies his approach. He doesn't confront us with anger. He offers kindness with a blade hidden inside it. He invites two of our most influential leaders to a private dinner in an upscale district, served by staff who move with rehearsed discretion. The table is warm lighting and curated hospitality. The subtext is cold. Lance frames integration as responsibility. He speaks about resource scarcity outside the walls. He mentions vulnerable families. He suggests that refusing the Commonwealth's structure would be an emotional, reckless decision, a betrayal of our people's need for stability. It's manipulation dressed as compassion. We counter with a request for transparency and equal representation. He smiles like we've asked for the moon. Then he delivers the quiet threat. If we cannot agree to a formal relationship, the Commonwealth will pursue other partnerships to secure regional order. He isn't threatening to destroy us directly. He's threatening to surround us with compliant neighbors until resistance becomes isolation. The strategy is elegant and cruel. Back in the underground networks, we receive more warnings. A resident who works near the gate tells us that inspection protocols are being updated. A soldier with a conscience hints that the intake logs are being cross-referenced for disruptive indicators. We realize our evidence must leave the city before it can be buried. So we prepare to smuggle the memo. We reduce it to multiple forms, handwritten copies hidden inside a medical manifest, micro notes tucked into the binding of a citizen handbook, and a sealed packet labeled as routine clinic transfers. The idea is redundancy again. If one method is caught, another might survive. The transport day arrives. The gate is busy and strangely quiet at the same time, the silence of heightened attention. We blend with a small group of workers moving crates and supplies. The sympathetic clerk keeps their expression neutral, but their hands tremble slightly as they pass the paperwork forward. Then the guard stops the crate. Not our whole shipment, just the one we most feared. He flips through the manifest with slow, deliberate care. Another soldier approaches with a device for scanning inventory tags. The air goes thin. We stand there in the worst kind of suspense, the kind where violence hasn't started yet, but you can feel its shadow stretching toward you. The guard asks a polite question. What's in the sealed packet? The clerk answers with a rehearsed explanation about medical sorting and bureaucratic policy. The guard nods, then he says something that hits like a loaded gun clicking into place. New inspection protocols will open everything. For a heartbeat, I consider a desperate move, an escape, a distraction, anything, but we don't act, because acting now would confirm guilt. So we watch as the seal is broken. We watch as the papers inside are pulled into daylight. We watch as the guard's eyes sharpen, not with confusion, but recognition. He's seen these words before, which means the Commonwealth isn't just monitoring us. It's already anticipating our rebellion. As they step aside to call a superior officer, the rest of the gate activity slows into a controlled hush. Around us, the city continues its performance of normal life. But for us, the illusion ends here. Because the next phase won't be meetings and paperwork, it will be consequences. You said the crate sits open like a wound. The guard's expression doesn't change much, but the air around him hardens. He lifts the papers with the caution of a man handling something contagious. The sympathetic clerk looks down, suddenly very interested in the floor. Our group holds still, because panic is a confession in a place built to detect weakness. The soldiers don't arrest us at the gate. That would be messy. The Commonwealth prefers clean decisions made behind closed doors. Instead, they escort us back into the city under the pretense of clarifying administrative irregularities. The statement is so dull it almost sounds harmless. But on the walk back, we notice the quiet shift. Extra patrols on rooftops, armored pairs at corners, a slow tightening of the city's breathing. We are no longer visitors. We are a problem requiring containment. By nightfall, the crackdown begins with precision. Our building is placed under temporary security review. Doors are monitored. Movement requires authorization. The city continues to glow with normal life in public districts, but around us, the Commonwealth's mask slips just enough to reveal the steel beneath. Then we get the message. A trusted ally inside the underground has been detained, someone who helped us move information and connect with worker-tier dissent. Their arrest is framed as routine, but we understand the subtext. The Commonwealth is cutting the wires of our network before it can spark. We have a narrow choice: retreat into silence or attempt a rescue that could shatter everything. We choose the rescue, not because we are reckless, but because we've learned the pattern of tyranny. If you let the system take one person quietly, it will take 10 more loudly later. We plan in fragments and shadows. A sympathetic soldier feeds us patrol schedules. A resident who works municipal maintenance offers access corridors beneath a utility station. We time our movement to coincide with a citywide festival, music and lights that can swallow the sounds of just enough chaos. The holding facility is smaller than we expected, but more fortified. The Commonwealth doesn't need large prisons when it can make a city feel like one. We slip through service doors, move down sterile hallways, and pass offices stacked with classified documents that smell of ink and authority. We find our ally bruised but alive. The extraction is fast and brutally quiet. We disable one guard without lethal force. We cut power to a corridor for less than 60 seconds, the perfect window between surveillance sweeps. We move our ally into the maintenance tunnel, then into the festival crowd where anonymity is a weapon. But we don't leave unscarred. As we retreat, we witness the Commonwealth's retaliation in real time. Loudspeakers politely announce new curfew policies. Emergency compliance measures are introduced. A public broadcast shows the governor addressing citizens with a calm voice and a sharpened message. Unrest will be answered, and stability will be protected at any cost. The city does what frightened populations often do. It accepts the trade, safety for silence. We regroup in our quarters, and our rescued ally confirms what we feared. The system is already labeling our group as instigators. Our names are being circulated in internal channels. The city's narrative is shifting from gratitude towards suspicion. Then the next blow lands. Across the Central District, speakers crackle alive again, this time with an announcement that slices through the festival joy like a cold blade. Our identities are declared publicly. No direct accusation yet, just persons of interest connected to unauthorized materials. It's a brilliant move. It turns ordinary citizens into informants. It turns us into a public threat without a single bullet fired. We retreat behind locked doors and dim lights, realizing that our time inside this city has collapsed from days into hours. Our evidence is not safe. Our people are not safe. And the Commonwealth has begun rewriting our story before we can tell the truth. As armored footsteps pass our hallway, a final understanding settles in. The gate incident wasn't a failure. It was the moment the Commonwealth decided the diplomatic phase was over, and now the war is officially personal. The morning after our names are broadcast, the Commonwealth feels like a city that has learned how to hunt. The streets still sparkle with routine, but the smiles are thinner. Citizens glance at us too long, then look away too quickly. Patrols linger near our building under the guise of public safety. The system is counting on social pressure to finish what paperwork started. We don't give it the chance. A midnight strategy meeting forms in the tightest circle we can trust. The goal is no longer negotiation, it's extraction. We need to leave the city before Lance and the governor convert suspicion into a permanent cage. But leaving isn't simple anymore. The gates are monitored, transport lists are rechecked. Identity confirmations now include secondary verification protocols. The Commonwealth doesn't lock you in with chains. It locks you in with procedure. We attempt to activate our outside communication again, and the replies that return are worse than silence. One message from home is short, tense, and coded with fear. Commonwealth aid teams have already arrived at our borders. Supplies are being offered. Rules are being suggested. Local leaders are being invited into private talks. The expansion has already begun. While we're trapped inside the heart of the machine, its arms are reaching toward everything we love. Lance Hornsby chooses this moment to offer us his version of mercy. He invites our leadership to a controlled meeting in a high-rise office overlooking the city, a view designed to hypnotize. The skyline is meant to say, "This is what you could protect if you stop resisting." He speaks with calm disappointment, as if our rebellion is an emotional phase he expected us to outgrow. He offers a revised deal, sign a formal integration agreement, publicly endorse the Commonwealth's regional mission, and our misunderstanding will be archived. In exchange, our communities receive immediate food, medical support, and military backup. The bargain is simple: safety for obedience. We ask for guarantees of autonomy, equal governance, and the right to reject military oversight. Lance doesn't argue. He doesn't even mock. He just slides a new document across the table. The language is softer than the first decree, which makes it more dangerous because hidden inside the updated contract is a clause that allows Commonwealth Command to appoint temporary administrators in allied territories during regional instability. It reads like a fail-safe. It is, in truth, a legal takeover mechanism. We refuse to sign. Lance's expression remains polite, but the temperature of the room drops. He stands, walks to the window, and speaks, without turning back. He says the Commonwealth cannot allow chaos to spread near a functioning civilization. He says the world is too fragile for sentimental independence. Then he delivers the most chilling sentence he's offered yet, not as a threat, but as an inevitability. He already has other leaders willing to agree. If we won't open our doors willingly, we will soon find ourselves between the Commonwealth and neighboring settlements that have joined it. Isolation as punishment. Integration by encirclement. Back in our quarters, we accelerate our escape plan, knowing time is no longer our ally. A sympathetic soldier arranges a narrow transport window. A worker-tier ally provides forged movement authorization. We pack light, choosing information over supplies. Because in this war, truth is the only resource that can change the map. As we approach a service exit under cover of a shift change, alarms do not sound. That's what scares us most. The Commonwealth is too competent to be caught off guard. If the gates are quiet, it may be because they want us to run, so they can decide where to catch us. And as the city lights flicker behind us like a dying star, we step into the unknown with one terrifying question burning in our minds. Are we escaping the Commonwealth, or walking straight into the first battlefield of its expansion? The Commonwealth doesn't arrive in our lands like an invasion. It arrives like a cure. We slip back into our territory carrying more than fear. We carry the scent of a machine that knows how to win without firing first. The moment we reach familiar roads, we see the first evidence of how far Lance's reach has already extended. Fresh signs, new patrol routes, supply wagons with clean markings and organized escorts. They call it assistance. They behave like owners. Commonwealth aid teams set up distribution points with surgical efficiency. They hand out food, antibiotics, fuel cells, things our people have been rationing like holy relics. But every crate has a rule attached to it. Every gift has conditions spoken softly enough to sound reasonable. They request local registries. They ask for population counts. They offer temporary advisory support to help us standardize security protocols. Paperwork becomes the first battlefield. Some of our residents welcome them with exhausted gratitude. After years of scraping survival out of ruined soil, the sight of abundant supplies feels like salvation. Parents look at their children and see the first genuine chance at a future that doesn't require a blade in the nightstand. But the Commonwealth's generosity is not evenly distributed. We notice patterns. Settlements with leaders leaning toward compliance receive more rations. Communities that hesitate are subtly deprioritized. The aid is not charity. It is behavioral engineering. A quiet ally inside one distribution crew slips us the proof. A set of internal distribution logs. The documents are clinical, almost polite, listing morale impact projections and leadership influence targets. The supplies are designed to shift loyalty before any official annexation is announced. The Commonwealth is buying hearts and pricing dissent. As we scramble to share the truth, another strike hits from a different angle. A respected local leader, someone known for independence and hard-earned credibility, is suddenly accused of treason. The charge comes with official-looking documents bearing Commonwealth stamps and administrative signatures. The accusation spreads faster than we can counter it. Fear is contagious, and official seals make lies feel like facts. We demand to see the evidence. We're shown a file of communications that suggest this leader planned to sabotage aid operations. The messages are cleanly typed, time-stamped, and neatly damning. Too neat. We compare the formatting to known Commonwealth internal records and spot the discrepancy. The document style is subtly wrong. The template is older version, formatting used earlier in the city. Someone forged these papers in a hurry, assuming we wouldn't notice. The trap is obvious now. The Commonwealth doesn't need to arrest our leadership immediately. It just needs to discredit them until our people replace them voluntarily. Across our territories, murmurs spread. Some residents begin to question whether resistance is selfish. Others accuse our returning group of dragging danger home. The Commonwealth is succeeding in its quietest strategy, turning survival into a moral argument against freedom. We call an emergency council under torchlight, surrounded by tired faces and hungry eyes. We reveal the distribution logs. We explain the forgery. We outline the expansion plan we intercepted in the city. Some people believe us immediately, others hesitate. Because the Commonwealth's greatest advantage isn't firepower, it's that it can offer comfort faster than we can offer certainty. As night deepens, we send messengers to neighboring settlements, urging them not to sign anything, not to accept oversight, not to confuse aid with allegiance. But as the riders disappear into the dark, we hear the distant rumble of armored vehicles moving along the main road. Not a full army, just enough to remind us that the Commonwealth's patience has limits. And in the flickering silence after the council disperses, I grasp the brutal truth. The war has already begun. We're just fighting the opening round with paper instead of bullets. Unity is easy when everyone is starving the same way. It becomes far harder when someone offers a full plate, if you agree to eat under their rules. The next days turn our territories into a political storm. The Commonwealth's presence grows more confident, more embedded. Their soldiers don't threaten openly. They make themselves useful. They repair fences, reinforce gates, run medical clinics with an efficiency that shames our scarcity. Every service is a subtle argument. Join us. This is what order looks like. We convene leaders from allied communities trying to forge a front before the Commonwealth can pick us apart one settlement at a time. The gathering is tense, heavy, with fatigue and fear. Some leaders speak with discipline, insisting that autonomy is worth sacrifice. Others look at the numbers. They speak about winter. They speak about children. They speak about how many graves they've already dug for pride. I can't blame them. That's the cruelty of Lance's strategy. It forces the moral burden onto the desperate. If we resist and people suffer, we become the villains. If we comply and lose ourselves, the suffering just changes shape. While debates rage above ground, we build something quieter below the surface. A resistance coalition designed to survive, even if our leadership is targeted. We establish hidden routes, secure caches, and coded courier systems. We're not preparing for rebellion out of arrogance. We're preparing because we've seen the Commonwealth's playbook. Then the betrayal comes, not as a dramatic ambush, but as a sudden vacancy. A trusted intermediary, someone who has been attending meetings, transporting messages, and vouching for Allied unity, vanishes overnight. Hours later, Commonwealth officers arrive at one of our coordination sites with unnerving precision. They know where we gathered. They know who spoke. They know what we planned. The raid is swift and humiliating. No massacre, no spectacle, just confiscation of materials and a calm statement about preventing insurgent destabilization. Our people watch in stunned silence as maps and notes are carried away like contraband. The next morning, a handwritten testimony reaches us through a back channel, delivered by someone terrified but determined. The document is a confession from a turncoat who helped facilitate Commonwealth access. But the confession isn't a plea for forgiveness. It's a warning. It outlines Lance's plan to replace unstable local leadership with Commonwealth-approved administrators under the banner of regional harmony. It lists the names of those marked for removal, leaders who inspire independence, fighters who can rally resistance, voices too trusted to be silenced quietly. One name on the list punches the breath out of the room, someone we love, someone our people rely on. The testimony is raw and imperfect, but it carries the weight of truth because it matches the pressure we've already felt tightening around us. We distribute copies to allied leaders, hoping urgency can cut through fear. Some respond with renewed resolve, others go quiet, because the closer the threat feels, the more tempting surrender becomes. As the sun sets, Commonwealth patrols increase on our perimeter. Their vehicles idle longer. Their officers request more meetings. They speak about cooperation with hardened smiles. The friendliness now feels like a countdown. In our final planning session of the night, we face the hardest question yet. Do we risk open confrontation now, before the Commonwealth has fully anchored itself? Or do we endure the slow squeeze until our choices evaporate? The answer doesn't arrive as wisdom. It arrives as necessity. Because just before midnight, a courier stumbles into our camp with a breathless message. Another neighboring settlement has signed an integration agreement. The Commonwealth is no longer approaching. It's surrounding. And as our council falls into a stunned silence, I realize we have crossed into the point of no return. This isn't about whether war is coming, it's about whether we can still choose the battlefield. The Commonwealth strategy reaches its most elegant, most cruel phase when it turns kindness into a weapon. A massive public aid event is announced across our territories. Bright banners, orderly lines, clean trucks rolling in like a moving promise. The soldiers are polished. The med teams are efficient. The supplies feel endless compared to our scarcity. Families gather with the cautious hope of people who have spent years learning not to dream too loudly. Lance's people don't call it annexation. They call it partnership. They set up a stage in the central square of our largest settlement. A Commonwealth official delivers a speech about unity and survival, carefully framing the story as if they are rescuers arriving at the last possible moment. They talk about a future where children don't need to learn fear as a first language. The crowd listens, not because they trust authority, because hunger makes every promise sound sacred. We know this event isn't about food, it's about optics. The Commonwealth needs our people to associate order with obedience before we can rally them toward resistance. So we arrive with something sharper than emotion. We arrive with proof. Copies of the annexation contract circulate through the crowd, folded pages passed hand to hand, tucked into sleeves, hidden inside ration crates. The document is plain and unglamorous, but that's what gives it power. It reads like a polite takeover, clause by clause. Military oversight, administrator appointment rights, the quiet ability to erase local authority during instability. We watch faces change as the words sink in. Confusion turns to anger, anger turns to questions. The official on stage notices the shift and pivots smoothly, escalating the rhetoric into the language of fear. Without unified command, the region will fall. Without shared oversight, our communities will collapse back into chaos. It's a narrative duel in real time. Then the protest begins, not orchestrated, not rehearsed, but inevitable. A mother steps forward and demands to know why her home needs outside permission to exist. A former patrol leader asks why aid comes with surveillance. A dozen voices rise, and the square fills with the dangerous sound of people rediscovering their spine. Commonwealth soldiers move in, not rushing, not brutal yet, just present enough to remind everyone what a disciplined force looks like when it decides patience has reached its limit. Our leaders step forward to amplify the truth. We speak about the forged treason files. We show the distribution logs that prove loyalty manipulation. We point to the annexation clauses and ask the crowd to read them with their own eyes. For a moment, the Commonwealth's shine dims, but the system has planned for this. A disruption erupts on the far edge of the square, shouts, a sudden scuffle, the sound of a weapon drawn. It's unclear who starts it, which is exactly the point. Panic spreads with the speed of wildfire. People stampede. The stage dissolves into chaos. Then gunshots crack the air. Whether they are warning shots or something worse doesn't matter. What matters is what the crowd believes. Fear resets the narrative in seconds. The Commonwealth claims the unrest proves our instability. They blame our group for inciting disorder, and just like that, the city-state doesn't need to argue with our truth anymore. It only needs to frame us as the reason peace can't exist. By nightfall, our homes are watched, our allies are questioned. The propaganda begins moving faster than our ability to correct it. We haven't lost the war, but we've learned the rule of this battlefield. You can win an argument and still lose the crowd. As we retreat into the darkness to plan our next move, a final message arrives from a nervous informant. They're preparing arrests at dawn, and the square that held hope hours ago now feels like the first line of a controlled siege. The Commonwealth doesn't respond to rebellion with chaos. It responds with administration. By morning, new notices are posted across our settlements. Cleanly printed, elegantly phrased declarations of temporary security measures. Curfews are imposed. Movement between communities requires approval. Public gatherings are flagged as potential threats to regional harmony. It reads like policy. It functions like a net. The first arrests are targeted and surgical. Not the loudest voices in the square, but the ones the Commonwealth believes can reorganize resistance before it becomes a wildfire. Teachers who quietly distribute documents, medics who treat injured protesters without reporting names, Patrol leads who refuse to accept Commonwealth command structure. The system wants to remove the brains first, then the heart. Our group splinters into action cells. We shift from public truth-telling to covert disruption. If the Commonwealth controls the story through supply and law, we attack the infrastructure that makes the story feel inevitable. We sabotage distribution routes, not to starve our people, but to break the dependence curve. We interrupt communication relays. We move resources into hidden caches so our communities can survive without performing loyalty for rations. We are careful, but the Commonwealth is faster. Pamela's presence begins to loom even from a distance. Her officials arrive with a new tone. Less charm, more authority backed by armor. The speeches no longer emphasize partnership. They emphasize stability at any cost. The soft language is replaced by the quiet threat of consequence. Then Lance pushes the line. An emergency order is introduced and circulated among local administrators. We obtain a copy through a nervous clerk who still remembers what freedom felt like. The document authorizes indefinite detention without trial for individuals deemed destabilizing influences. The criteria are broad enough to swallow anyone. The Commonwealth has written permission to erase us. We gather our inner circle in a hidden safe house, a reinforced cellar beneath an abandoned civic building. The space smells of dust and oil and fear held too long in the chest. We review the emergency order, mapping its implications across our allied communities. The conclusion is brutal. This is no longer a political pressure campaign. This is a pre-war lockdown. We decide to move our evidence to multiple locations at once. Distributed archives, coded testimony logs, sealed copies of contracts and distribution records. If the Commonwealth wants to control history, we will make history too difficult to erase in one sweep. But even as we plan, a quiet dread grows. Because our last protest taught us something essential. The Commonwealth's greatest advantage is not force. It is anticipation. And then the raid comes. Not with sirens, not with dramatic screams, just the sudden heavy sound of boots above us. A steel door crashes inward, flashlights slice through dust. Orders are spoken in low, practiced voices. The soldiers move with the calm precision of people who were never truly worried about losing control. Someone betrayed our location. We scatter through pre-marked exits, narrow tunnels, and back corridors designed for exactly this moment. I clutch a bundle of documentation to my chest. Like a heartbeat made of paper, behind us the safe house becomes a place of echoes and captured breath. We escape into the early dawn fog, but the victory feels thin. Because the raid confirms the worst truth of all. The Commonwealth isn't improvising a crackdown, it's executing a blueprint. As we regroup at a new screw-hide point, exhausted and furious, a scout arrives with the final blow. Commonwealth armored units are mobilizing toward our outer settlements. The paperwork phase is ending. The enforcement phase has begun, and we are running out of quiet places to breathe. Every time we carve out a moment of momentum, the Commonwealth responds with something colder than anger. It responds with narrative. The raid on our safe house doesn't become public news as a violation of rights. It becomes a preventive stabilization operation. The phrasing spreads through official notices, through calm speeches, through administrators who wear sympathy like a uniform. The Commonwealth is teaching our people a dangerous lesson. That resistance is the reason peace keeps slipping away. Then the next move lands like a knife disguised as a handshake. A major supply depot, one that feeds multiple settlements, is destroyed in the night. The blast is clean and devastating. Food burns, medicine turns to smoke, families wake to the sound of their lifeline collapsing. And before we can even count the losses, the accusation arrives. Risk bulletins, stamped and distributed within hours, blame our resistance the way a prosecutor blames a suspect before the trial begins. The Commonwealth doesn't need proof. It needs a story that feels orderly, one that protects the system's innocence. We know the truth. The explosion is too convenient, too aligned with the Commonwealth's emerging emergency powers. It smells like engineered chaos, a manufactured wound that justifies a tighter grip. The goal isn't to starve us. It's to make our people fear us more than they fear the empire moving in around them. But suspicion is a wildfire. Some residents turn on us in the streets. They ask why our fight keeps bringing consequences to their children. They ask if we're defending freedom or feeding ego. The harshest part is that their anger is honest. They're exhausted. They're desperate. They are being manipulated by a machine that understands the weight of desperation. We respond with the one thing the Commonwealth can't easily sanitize: evidence. A runner delivers an internal propaganda script stolen from a Commonwealth coordination office. It's not a confession of terrorism, it's something more chilling. A step-by-step messaging playbook outlining how to depict us as extremists, how to frame compliance as compassion, how to turn the public's hunger into moral pressure. The script even includes timing notes. And there it is, a staged security incident scheduled for the next day. The depot explosion was only Act 1. Act 2 is meant to be louder. We gather our remaining leaders under a dim canopy of night, guided by lanterns and the hard edge of urgency. We don't have the luxury of a perfect plan. We have the necessity of a fast one. Our strategy becomes surgical. We will disrupt the next staged incident before it can unfold. We will collect live witness testimony. We will force the Commonwealth to lose control of the story in front of the people it has been grooming into obedient gratitude. We position scouts at likely sites, distribution lines, checkpoint corridors, the main square where Commonwealth officials love to perform stability. We instruct our people to be seen but not violent, to be present but disciplined. In this moment, optics are as lethal as bullets. Morning arrives with the subtle tension of a storm behind glass. Commonwealth trucks roll in, officials smile, soldiers line the perimeter, and we watch for the trigger event the propaganda script promised. The incident begins as a small commotion, an argument near a supply line, a sudden accusation, a staged panic. But this time, we're ready. We step into the center of it with clear voices and printed proof. We show the propaganda script. We name the plan. We call out the manipulation in front of the crowd. For a heartbeat, the square holds its breath. The Commonwealth hesitates. That hesitation is everything. But then armored units move to restore order, and the official leading the operation lifts a megaphone with a calm voice and a dangerous smile. He declares the area under emergency control. And as the soldiers begin advancing toward us in formation, I realize the Commonwealth may allow truth to be spoken, only if it can be crushed immediately afterward. The square becomes a chessboard where every step risks turning into a funeral. Commonwealth soldiers tighten the perimeter. Their movements are precise, rehearsed, engineered to look like protection instead of intimidation. The official with the megaphone keeps repeating the same phrase: stability, 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 until the word stops sounding like safety and starts sounding like a verdict. We refuse to be dragged quietly into the Commonwealth's version of order. Instead of raising weapons, we raise names. We read aloud the clauses from the annexation contracts. We cite the distribution manipulation logs. We hold up the propaganda script like a mirror and ask the crowd to look at themselves inside it. The reaction is not instant unity. It's something messier and more human. Confusion, anger, fear, the slow awakening of people who realize they may have been gently guided toward surrender for weeks. A few citizens step forward, emboldened by the audacity of seeing authority challenged without immediate slaughter. They speak of relatives reassigned without explanation. They speak of aid offered only after compliance meetings. They speak of administrators who arrived smiling and left with the keys to local decision-making. The Commonwealth's shine begins to dull in public view. Then the system makes its counterplay. A detachment of soldiers attempts to arrest one of our most visible leaders, quietly, efficiently, as if they can cut the head off the moment before the crowd learns it has a spine. But something unexpected happens. A senior officer within the Commonwealth unit hesitates. You can see it in the body language, the fractional delay, the glance toward the crowd, the calculation of conscience against orders. This is the first visible crack in their armor of obedience. The officer lowers his weapon and steps back. It's a small act, but it detonates in the square like thunder. Citizens react not with violence, but with a roar of unity that wasn't there seconds earlier. The soldiers, now exposed to the fact that refusal is possible, shift uneasily. The Commonwealth's greatest fear isn't rebellion, it's contagious doubt within its own ranks. We seize the moment. A runner distributes printed copies of the emergency detention order and the propaganda script to the front rows. People read with widening eyes, passing pages like wildfire made of ink. The crowd's energy turns from uncertainty to betrayal. Pamela's distant authority suddenly feels less like a guardian and more like a throne built on hidden machinery. The official with the megaphone tries to regain the narrative. He announces that our materials are unauthorized falsifications. He declares us destabilizers. He warns that further unrest will be answered with force. But the words don't land the way they used to, because now the crowd has paper in their hands, and paper changes who gets to define reality. Meanwhile, in the shadows of the square, our inside allies coordinate a second push. They override a local broadcast relay, just long enough to air a short, controlled statement that frames the truth in simple, undeniable terms. Not a speech, a warning, a promise, a signal that the resistance is no longer a rumor. The city-state's attempted takeover of our identity is now visible, spoken aloud, documented, and witnessed. For the first time, the Commonwealth appears uncertain about which version of order it can enforce without losing legitimacy entirely. But that uncertainty doesn't last, because Lance Hornsby is not a man who allows public hesitation to live long. By evening, new orders circulate through Commonwealth channels. Faster, harsher, less diplomatic. Tactical raids are authorized across multiple settlements. Our families become leverage. Our supply lines become targets. The moment of public truth has triggered the escalation we feared. We gather our people under cover of darkness, preparing for a fight that is no longer symbolic. This is no longer ink versus ink. This is ink versus blood. And as a scout rushes in with a breathless report that Commonwealth armored units are moving toward our largest allied settlement, the final reality lands like a punch to the ribs. We just ignited the spark. Now we have to survive the fire. The Commonwealth doesn't panic when the truth starts spreading. It cleans. After the square confrontation, the system shifts into something colder than retaliation. It becomes revision. Office doors that were once open to civilian administration are now guarded. Clerks who used to exchange casual smiles now avoid eye contact. Trucks arrive at night to remove boxes of records under the label of archival consolidation. The city isn't just responding to us, it's preparing to erase us. We receive the first warning from an inside ally who works in municipal logistics. Their hands shake as they pass us a short internal notice. It lists upcoming data hygiene operations, a sterile phrase that hides the real intention: purge anything that can link Lance's expansion strategy to illegal coercion. The Commonwealth understands that a war of bullets is messy. A war of memory is cleaner. So we build a counter-archive. We gather testimonies from medics, former checkpoint officers, and displaced worker-tier families. We translate their statements into written affidavits. Simple language, precise timelines, details that can survive cross-checking. We assign runners to distribute copies in separate directions. We're not just protecting evidence anymore, we're protecting the right to be believed. But the Commonwealth is faster than we want to admit. A second insider, this one wearing armor, confirms something terrifying. Lance has ordered a recalibration of all local administrative databases tied to our settlements. The old files are being replaced by new summaries that frame coercion as mutual security alignment. A lie is easier to enforce if it looks official. We realize the digital records will not survive. So we shift everything to paper and people. A small team slips into an old school building that the Commonwealth uses as a provisional storage site. The location is unglamorous enough to evade heavy guards. Inside, we find stacks of sealed military reports, field notes, annexation drafts, arrest logs, and confidential communications that mention neutralization thresholds. This is the skeleton of Lance's blueprint. We don't have time to move it all, so we prioritize the most damning pieces. We copy, we photograph, we handwrite critical sections onto waterproof pages, each one tucked into separate carriers. One runner hides a bundle inside a children's book binding. Another conceals pages within a medical supply case labeled as antibiotic inventory. A third stuffs micronotes into the lining of a coat. Redundancy is survival. We are halfway through relocation when the smell of smoke arrives. At first, we think it's an accident, an old-world building finally giving up. But the fire spreads too quickly, too evenly. The exits are blocked with suspicious efficiency. Within minutes, the school archive is a roaring furnace. The Commonwealth doesn't destroy truth with debate. It destroys it with heat. We escape with what we manage to collect, coughing in alley shadows while ash rains down like gray snow. The flames reflect in the eyes of our inside allies, and the message is brutally clear. This system would rather burn its own history than allow citizens to read it. That night, the governor's office releases a calm statement about an unfortunate infrastructure incident. No mention of records, no mention of why soldiers blocked access. The official narrative is so smooth it almost dares the public to challenge it. But we have survivors' hands still stained with soot. We have affidavits. We have fragments of the blueprint that escaped the fire. And in the darkness of our new safe location, we hear the city's pulse changing. More sirens, more patrols, more quiet knocks on doors. The Commonwealth is done pretending this is a misunderstanding. It is now a containment campaign. And as I look at the singed edge of a rescued report, I realize something that steals my breath. If they're willing to burn the archives, then the next thing they'll try to burn is the people who remember what was inside. By morning, the city is polished again. That's the most frightening part. The ashes haven't even cooled, and the Commonwealth has already resumed its performance of stability. Streets are cleared. Markets reopen. Public announcements assure citizens that order remains intact. The system moves like a creature that regenerates skin before anyone can see where it was wounded. But beneath the surface, something has changed. Fear is no longer one-sided. We're not the only ones who feel the temperature rising. After the archive fire, our strategy shifts. We can't win a paper war if the enemy controls the incinerator, so we pivot to what the Commonwealth can't easily burn without consequences. Lives, witnesses, faces. We gather survivors who have been quietly harmed by the system, families whose relatives vanished after questioning policy, soldiers who were ordered to enforce detentions without trial, clinic staff who saw reassignment lists with death-like finality. We don't dramatize their pain. We let the truth breathe in their own words. Each testimony is written into a clean dossier, short, undeniable, signed with names and dates. We print copies in bulk, trusting the old-world principle that mass distribution can outpace censorship. Then we plan a rally, not in the shadows, in the heart of the Commonwealth's image, the central square. It's a calculated risk bordering on madness, but the alternative is to let Lance rewrite reality one document at a time until resistance becomes a myth. The day of the rally arrives with a tense calm, as if the entire city is waiting to see which nerve will break first. Citizens gather cautiously at first, then in waves. We step forward without weapons, carrying folders and printed testimonies. We place the dossiers in people's hands like offerings. We speak about the archives that burned. We name the emergency detention order. We connect the expansion strategy to the raids that stripped communities of their voice. The crowd listens, and something old and human ignites. Not rage, recognition. The Commonwealth sends armored units to encircle the square. The soldiers move in disciplined arcs, and for a moment it looks like the rally will end the way the system prefers. Quiet arrests, controlled dispersal, no public fracture. Then the order comes. We don't hear it clearly at first, but we see the shift in posture. A line of soldiers raises weapons toward civilians. A senior officer steps forward and refuses. It's a single act of defiance that changes the gravity of the whole moment. The officer doesn't shout. He doesn't posture. He simply lowers his weapon and says in a voice meant for anyone close enough to hear, he won't harm unarmed people for political convenience. The ripple effect is immediate. A few soldiers hesitate, then more. The crowd's fear breaks and reforms into courage. We seize this opening with the only force that matters now, visible truth. We hold up a sealed lethal force order we manage to recover from a sympathetic admin clerk. The paper is stamped, signed, and chilling in its simplicity. We don't need to add drama. The document does it for us. Someone in the front row reads it aloud to those who can't see. The words spread like a spark through dry grass. The Commonwealth tries to regain control with loudspeakers and official denials. But denials sound small when people are holding the proof in their hands. For the first time, the city begins to look at its own leadership not as protectors, but as architects of a controlled fear. As the sun dips and the square remains packed, our inside allies whisper the most important update yet. The army is splitting, not into chaos, into conscience. That night, as we retreat to plan our next move, the city's lights feel different, less like a promise, more like a battlefield waiting to define itself. Because now the fight isn't just outsiders versus the Commonwealth, it's the Commonwealth versus the truth, inside its own bones. And the next phase won't be about whether citizens believe us. It will be about whether power can survive when its soldiers stop pretending they don't have a choice. The Commonwealth shifts from intimidation to erasure. After the public showdown, the bureaucracy moves like a wounded animal, fast, quiet, and viciously precise. The smiling administrators disappear from view, replaced by officers who speak in short sentences and longer silences. Checkpoints multiply. Transport is restricted. And in the background, something even more dangerous begins. History is being edited in real time. We hear it first from our inside allies. Records are vanishing. Not just the propaganda scripts and emergency orders we exposed, but entire personnel files, reassignment logs, and disciplinary reports linked to Lance's operations. Offices that once hummed with routine paperwork are suddenly under audit. Clerks are reassigned overnight. Evidence rooms are sealed under new authorization levels. The Commonwealth isn't just trying to defeat our movement. It's trying to ensure it was never justified. We scramble to preserve what we can. A network of worker-tier citizens, nurses, maintenance crews, junior administrators begins copying documents before they're scrubbed. They don't call themselves rebels. They call themselves tired of being lied to. We set up a relay system. Information transferred in small bundles, hidden inside harmless cargo. A medical shipment becomes a library of truth. A school archive becomes a safe vault. Every page we save feels like rescuing someone from drowning. Pamela's public tone changes too. Her speeches grow firmer, colder, laced with the language of national survival. She paints the unrest as an external infection brought in by outsiders. Us. She never says Lance's name in public now, but we can feel his hand behind every tightened policy. He's not letting her lose face. He's using her authority as camouflage. We plan a decisive reveal, one massive, undeniable dump of proof across the city and our territories. If the Commonwealth wants to destroy our credibility, we will force it into the light so brightly it can't hide behind curfews. But the system anticipates us again. A traitor inside our pipeline, someone squeezed by fear, bribed by privilege, or broken by the weight of consequence, leaks the location of one of our primary archives. It isn't a fortress. It's a modest building repurposed for storage, guarded by nothing but secrecy and faith. The strike comes at night. We arrive too late to stop the first flames. The fire eats shelves and documents with brutal speed, turning years of hidden abuse into smoke. The worst part is its precision. The books that burn are not random, they are targeted. Military reports, annexation drafts, illegal order chains, reassignment lists with names of the disappeared. The Commonwealth doesn't want chaos, it wants amnesia. We managed to pull a few sealed bundles from the back room, enough to preserve fragments of the truth. But the loss is still devastating. People around us stand in stunned silence, watching the fire like they're witnessing their own memories being murdered. In the ashes, we find a symbol of Lance's desperation, a half-burned directive letter with his authorization code still visible. It's proof he's not acting as a distant coordinator, but as an active architect of cleansing. That means he's afraid, and afraid men tighten their fists. The next morning, we pivot our strategy. If the Commonwealth is erasing paper, we will elevate voices. We begin collecting witness testimony openly. Citizens, defected soldiers, families of the reassigned, people whose memories can't be incinerated with one match. We train them to speak in clear, consistent narratives. We document their stories in duplicates, hiding them in multiple settlements. We will turn human memory into a living archive. And as we finalize plans for a public rally inside the city's central square, one truth becomes inescapable. This war is no longer about territory. It's about who gets to define what was real. The rally is not born from courage alone, it's born from exhaustion. The Commonwealth's attempt to burn the truth doesn't silence the city, it angers it. People who once accepted order as a lifeline now recognize the cost of that order, a system so committed to control that it would rather destroy evidence than confront its own corruption. Our new strategy is simple and terrifying. If paper can be erased, then the people will become the evidence. We gather survivors of the Commonwealth's quiet punishments, workers reassigned after dissent, families who watched loved ones vanish into administrative transfers, soldiers who received orders that felt more like crimes than commands. We listen to them in dim apartments and sealed basements, recording details with care. We build a dossier not of documents, but of lived truth. And then we plan to speak it in daylight. The central square of the city is chosen because of what it represents. It's where Commonwealth celebrations are staged, where unity is performed, where Pamela's image is polished for public consumption. If the system is a theater, the square is its brightest stage. We arrive at dawn in small groups to avoid triggering early lockdown. The crowd grows slowly, almost cautiously, as if people are still testing whether bravery will be punished instantly. Our leaders stand among them, not above them. The goal is not to appear like conquerors of authority. The goal is to appear like neighbors reclaiming reality. We distribute printed witness summaries, short, readable accounts that connect names to actions, testimonies to dates. The words are plain and devastating. They don't shout, they simply refuse to be ignored. Commonwealth soldiers assemble at the edges of the square, not in panic, in protocol. Their commander issues a calm dispersion order, citing emergency stability legislation. The same laws we exposed months ago now return like a boomerang built to break bone. We don't leave. A mother steps forward and reads her testimony aloud with a trembling voice that grows steadier with every sentence. A former officer admits he was ordered to enforce detentions without trial. A nurse describes how patient records were altered to justify reassignment. The crowd begins repeating those details to each other like a rising chant of memory. The soldiers tighten formation. The commander receives a message through his earpiece. We can feel the moment shift. This is the dangerous hinge, the point at which the Commonwealth must decide whether to preserve legitimacy or preserve authority. Then something extraordinary happens. A line of soldiers hesitates. Not all of them, just enough. We notice the subtle friction, a rifle lowered slightly, a glance exchanged, the unspoken question of whether obedience is still moral. That hesitation spreads through the crowd like oxygen. People step closer, not to fight, to witness, because they understand that what happens next will define the city's soul. The commander raises his voice, repeating the dispersion order, now edged with threat. He cites disorder. He cites regional safety. He frames us as external chaos contaminating a delicate civilization. But the crowd no longer sees us as outsiders. They see us as a mirror of what they've been swallowing in silence. The standoff reaches its breaking point when a senior officer, older, visibly weary, steps forward and refuses to authorize violence against unarmed citizens. The act is small, almost bureaucratic in its restraint. But it detonates the Commonwealth's illusion of unified command. The square erupts, not with bloodshed, but with a roar of public refusal. And in that rising tide of voices, we realize the war has crossed into a new phase. The system is no longer fighting us alone. It is now fighting its own people. The refusal in the square spreads faster than any alarm. The senior officer's decision, quiet, controlled, insani, doesn't just slow the Commonwealth's hand, it exposes the fact that the hand can tremble. The crowd senses it immediately. People who had been spectators step forward as participants. The air changes from fear to something sharper, ownership. Our leaders don't waste the moment on speeches. We focus on clarity. We hold up the witness summaries again. We pass them into the front lines of citizens. We point to the blank spaces where names of the reassigned should have been. Missing lives reduced to missing ink. We show how the emergency stability laws were designed to silence communities, not protect them. The commander tries to reclaim the narrative with official language. He calls our materials unauthorized. He frames the rally as a foreign infiltration into a delicate civilization, but the crowd now has enough lived truth to recognize the shape of manipulation. Then something unthinkable happens. A second unit of soldiers lowers their weapons, not dramatically, just deliberately. A few steps back, a few helmets turned away from civilians. A quiet refusal that feels like a crack running through the foundation of an empire. The city's rebellion is no longer just ours, it is internal. Across the square, citizens begin chanting against corruption. The chant isn't elegant, it's raw. It's the sound of a population waking from a long, controlled sleep. The Commonwealth's polished order suddenly looks fragile under the weight of honest noise. We sense a larger danger approaching, because a system that loses control of the story in public will try to regain it in secret. So we attempt to force the next move into daylight. A sympathetic admin clerk has risked everything to hand us a sealed directive. It is an official order authorizing lethal force under extreme destabilization conditions. The stamp is real, the signatures are real, and the timing aligns with this exact gathering. We don't need to interpret it, we just need to show it. We hold it up. The crowd surges toward the front line to see. A resident reads the key lines out loud, and the words become a weapon more powerful than any rifle in the square. The order doesn't just incriminate a commander, it implicates the architecture of the Commonwealth itself. In that moment, the governor's distant authority suddenly feels less maternal, less civil, more imperial. The commander's composure fractures. He steps aside, receives a rapid update through his earpiece, then pivots to an aggressive solution. Arrests, targeted, immediate. The soldiers who still obey move forward to seize our most visible leaders. But now civilians intervene, not with arms, but with bodies. They form a barrier of ordinary people refusing to be stepped over. It's messy, it's chaotic, it's beautifully insane. The square becomes a living argument that the Commonwealth cannot win without destroying the very legitimacy it claims to protect. News ripples outward. In lower-tier districts, more citizens flood into the streets. In officer barracks, more soldiers begin questioning orders. In administrative halls, lines of power start collapsing under the weight of public scrutiny. This is no longer a controlled protest. It is an uprising. We retreat at dusk, not because we've lost the square, but because we've won something bigger, momentum that can't be folded back into silence. And as we slip into the narrow alleys beyond the cheering crowd, we hear the most dangerous rumor of the night. Lance Hornsby has disappeared from public view. A man like that doesn't retreat to accept defeat. He retreats to sharpen a final blade. The city wakes into a new kind of tension, the tension of a storm that has already started inside the walls. The Commonwealth tries to restore order with official broadcasts, urging calm, promising investigations, insisting that stability remains intact. But the words land differently now. The citizens have seen the lethal force directive. They've seen officers hesitate. They've felt the power of a crowd that refuses fear. The illusion of absolute control is gone. And Lance understands that best of all. He doesn't reappear to debate. He reappears in motion. Our inside allies report that he's activating loyalist clusters, small, disciplined units of soldiers and administrators who owe their status to him. These teams begin operating independently of the governor's public messaging. They raid resistant safe points. They confiscate witness materials. They attempt to isolate the most influential civic voices behind protective custody. The language is careful. The intent is violent. We intercept a new pattern of movement, convoys traveling at odd hours toward our allied settlements outside the city. The Commonwealth's strategy is shifting from internal narrative control to external pressure. If Lance can't silence the rebellion in the square quickly, he will threaten our families beyond it. We confirm the fear with a stolen strike list, a clean, typed document naming our communities and intended actions under the guise of regional stabilization. The dates are near. The targets are personal. This is how a collapsing empire tries to reassert gravity, by making the cost of resistance feel unbearable. We respond with coordination. Resistance cells across the city synchronize schedules, safe routes, and fallback locations. We establish short-range courier chains with civilians who know alleyways better than any soldier. We recruit defected officers quietly, offering them a future built on accountability rather than obedience. Each defection is small. Together they form a new spine. Meanwhile, the governor's inner circle begins to fracture. Reports suggest that Pamela is being urged to publicly distance herself from Lance to preserve a sliver of legitimacy. But legitimacy is a fragile currency. The more she shifts blame onto her enforcer, the more she admits the system was built to allow his brutality. Either way, the throne shakes. We plan a surgical capture, not a grand raid, a swift removal of the man-converting policy into conquest. A sympathetic security tech provides Lance's private convoy pattern. It's the first real opening we've had to corner him without dragging civilians into chaos. The route runs along a controlled corridor near the city perimeter, a place where loyalty thins and escape routes widen. We set the ambush in silence. No banners, no speeches, just disciplined readiness. But as we move into position, something feels wrong. Too quiet, too empty. The convoy arrives late. Then not at all. Instead, armored units emerge from side streets and rooftops in a tightening arc. The trap swings around us like a closing jaw. Lance didn't fall into our net. He used our plan to map our last reliable cells. We fight our way out with minimal casualties, but the message lands hard. He is still 2 moves ahead, and he is done playing politics. As we retreat into the city's industrial edge, a final update arrives from an exhausted runner. Commonwealth assault teams have already crossed into our outer settlements. The war is no longer confined to city squares and paperwork. It is now on our Earth, and in the dim light of a burning horizon beyond the walls, we understand the truth of this chapter's end. The uprising ignited the city, but Lance has chosen to answer it by setting our world on fire. Night doesn't fall gently anymore. It drops like a verdict. The Commonwealth's first wave of assaults hits our outer settlements with the cold precision of a system that has finally stopped pretending. These are not chaotic raids. They are coordinated stabilization operations, executed by soldiers who move with the confidence of people backed by law, supply, and a narrative already written in their favor. We arrive to the aftermath of the first strike at dawn, fire-blackened barricades, shattered watch platforms, and the stunned silence of residents who expected negotiations, not armored columns. The Commonwealth banners are already up, posted like flags planted into the bones of our autonomy. Lance's fingerprints are everywhere. A captured officer confirms the new doctrine: target leadership circles, disrupt supply caches, and force compliance by making resistance feel like a luxury the hungry can't afford. The strategy is both tactical and psychological. The Commonwealth doesn't just want territory, it wants our people to believe surrender is the mature choice. Back in the city, the uprising continues in irregular pulses. Citizens gather, disperse, regroup. Loyalist cells try to intimidate key neighborhoods, painting our movement as the threat to peace. The governor's broadcasts promise review and reform, but they are drowned by Lance's momentum, which now has the energy of a man fighting to preserve his own inevitability. We need a counterstroke that's more than anger. We need proof that can fracture his authority inside his own chain of command. Then we get it. A defected communications specialist brings us internal battle dispatches, radio logs, and tactical summaries that reveal unauthorized brutality and timing that contradicts Pamela's official statements. The documents show Lance accelerated the assaults without full Civic Council review, using emergency clauses as a blank check. It is the evidence of a coup disguised as policy. We don't keep it hidden. We move fast, copying the logs into handwritten transcripts for street-level distribution and using inside allies to leak the core details to key officer groups. We frame the message carefully. The Commonwealth is not collapsing because citizens demand truth. It is destabilizing because one man is rewriting the law to serve his ambition. The effect is subtle at first, then dramatic. We see it in the checkpoints where soldiers delay orders and ask for verification. We see it in patrol units that shift from aggression to restraint. We see it in the way loyalists begin to operate more isolated from the wider army, like a faction that knows its time may be running out. But Lance responds with brutal speed. He orders containment raids inside the city to seize dissent hubs. 2 resistance cells are hit in the same hour. Civilian buildings are searched under emergency clearance. Witness summaries are confiscated. The message is clear. If his legitimacy is bleeding, he will clamp the wound by force. We regroup in a dim industrial district, watching the city lights flicker through smoke and winter haze. Our council is smaller now, our losses heavier, but the alliance beyond the walls is finally solidifying under shared threat. Former rivals agree to coordinate defenses, scouts begin sharing routes. The people who once argued about leadership now argue about how to keep families alive through the next week. The Commonwealth has done the one thing no diplomatic speech could ever accomplish. It has united us. We plan a decisive stand at our largest settlement, a place sturdy enough to absorb a direct push and vital enough to become our symbol of refusal. We fortify choke points, set layered traps, and position relief routes for civilians. As we finalize perimeter plans, a runner arrives with breathless urgency. A massive convoy is on the move, not a threat, not a warning, a promise of collision, and as the distant rumble of engines begins to echo across the landscape, I feel the truth settle into my chest like iron. This chapter of war will end not in debate, but in a battlefield where our unity is tested against an empire's last burst of certainty. The convoy comes like a moving storm. Long lines of armored vehicles and supply trucks roll toward our largest settlement with the calm inevitability of a force that expects history to bend. The Commonwealth doesn't announce it as an invasion. It calls it a protective restoration effort, but we can read the language of steel. They believe this single strike will crush the alliance before it becomes permanent. We answer with something the Commonwealth underestimated: coordination. Our scouts shadow the convoy from the tree line, relaying live updates through a chain of runners who know the land more intimately than any map. We don't meet the Commonwealth on open ground where their formation can swallow us. We pull them into constricted corridors of rubble, broken roads, and hardened barricades, places where discipline matters less than adaptability. The first clash is sharp and controlled. We trigger staggered traps to separate the lead units from the supply backbone. We force their med teams into protective mode. We disrupt their communication with jamming devices built from salvaged equipment and the raw ingenuity of survivors who have spent years turning junk into salvation. The Commonwealth's response is textbook: loudspeaker warnings, offers of amnesty, a demand for our leaders to present themselves for lawful integration. We refuse to step into their script. Instead, we broadcast our own message across the settlement using a repurposed relay tower. We share our terms in plain language: no annexation, no appointed administrators, no armed oversight disguised as aid. We do not reject cooperation. We reject conquest. Then something unexpected happens inside the Commonwealth ranks. A unit at the rear refuses to advance into a civilian zone. It's not a loud mutiny, it's a procedural stall. They request confirmation of lethal authorization. They cite the newly leaked internal logs about Lance's unauthorized escalation. They stall again. This hesitation creates a crack wide enough for truth to enter. We exploit it by distributing more transcripts of the radio dispatches we captured, proof that Lance's campaign has drifted beyond ethical command. The documents reach Commonwealth soldiers who have family in the city, who have watched the uprisings with growing discomfort, who are no longer certain the empire they serve is aligned with the civilization they were promised. The battle begins shifting from a physical contest to a moral one. Lance can feel it. A loyalist strike team attempts a decisive push to seize our central command post. The assault is brutal, efficient, and nearly successful. We lose fighters we can't afford to lose. A key defensive line cracks, but our coalition holds. Because this time we aren't defending a single settlement. We're defending the idea that our lives cannot be filed into someone else's hierarchy. As the fight drags into late afternoon, Commonwealth casualty retrieval becomes chaotic. Their supply flow fractures. Their backline leadership struggles to maintain cohesion among units increasingly skeptical of the mission's legitimacy. We intercept a short internal battlefield report, signed by a shaken officer, confirming unauthorized brutality and warnings of a growing conscience split. The signature itself matters. It's proof that doubt is no longer isolated. We leak the report immediately. Within hours, it reaches the city's civic council and splinters public confidence in Lance even further. The governor's camp begins to distance itself openly. The Loyalists begin to operate like a shrinking island. By nightfall, the Commonwealth's convoy withdraws partially. Not a full retreat, but a tactical recalibration that smells like something more than strategy. It smells like political collapse. We stand among the wounded and the exhausted as the engines fade into the distance, feeling victory and grief tangled together. We didn't win peace tonight. We won oxygen. Enough space to push toward the next move, the removal of Lance's grip, not just from our borders, but from the Commonwealth's core. And as the flames of our defense flicker against the dark, a final realization lands with brutal clarity. The final war will not be decided by who has the bigger army. It will be decided by who can survive long enough to make the enemy's system turn on itself. I never wanted to be the last wall standing, but the moment the convoy rolled back, damaged, uncertain, and exposed, we understood something crucial. The Commonwealth could be pushed, not defeated outright yet, but forced to bleed in public, forced to hesitate in front of its own soldiers. We spend the next days turning that hesitation into gravity. Our largest settlement becomes a working fortress. The wounded are moved into layered safe zones. Watch rotations become tighter. Fuel and food are redistributed with a new rule. Nothing depends on Commonwealth supply lines anymore. It's not just strategy, it's psychological survival. We refuse to let our people believe comfort must be purchased with submission. Across the region, our alliance solidifies into something that feels like a new country without a flag. Old rivalries become quiet shame. The Commonwealth's pressure has accomplished what years of speeches never could: shared purpose. We strike at the edges, not the heart. Guerrilla teams target the convoy's weakened supply routes. Bridges are disabled at night. Road bottlenecks are seeded with traps designed to slow armor and separate leadership, vehicles from their escort. The goal isn't maximum violence. The goal is maximum doubt. A captured radio unit yields the next piece of ammunition we need: transcripts of frantic coordination orders, some signed with Lance's private authorization code. These messages contradict the governor's public statements about restraint and reform. The language is aggressive, impatient, personal. It reads like a man trying to hold an empire together with sheer will. We turn those transcripts into paper. We distribute them in the city through our inside network and in the outer settlements through fast courier chains. The rumor becomes documented reality. Lance is escalating beyond the governor's stated intent. The crack inside the Commonwealth widens. We see it when a smaller Commonwealth unit arrives at a border checkpoint and requests negotiation rather than immediate compliance. We see it when two officers openly argue about lawful authority in front of civilian witnesses. And we feel it when a surrendered squad says, not with anger, but with exhaustion, that they didn't sign up to wage a political conquest disguised as peacekeeping. But Lance is not a man who accepts fractures. He adapts. A final solution broadcast goes out across regional frequencies. It frames our alliance as the last obstacle to civilization. It promises stability delivered through decisive reunification. The message is tight, persuasive, designed for citizens who crave an end to uncertainty. Then the real threat arrives behind the words. A concentrated loyalist strike team attempts a targeted night assault on our settlement's command corps. They don't come to win a battle. They come to decapitate leadership and collapse morale in one surgical sweep. We were ready. The outer perimeter holds long enough for civilians to evacuate deeper into secured zones. We lure the strike team into layered choke points, narrow corridors of barricades and controlled fire lanes. The fight is brutal and close, the kind that turns time into a blur of breath and blood. We lose good people. There is no way around that truth. But the strike team loses something more expensive than bodies. It loses momentum. One captured officer carries a sealed operational note, short, blunt, signed by Lance's trusted inner circle. The order instructs loyalists to ignore emerging civic council limitations and proceed without delay if local commanders hesitate. That single line matters. It's proof that Lance is no longer just enforcing the system, he is overriding it. We end this chapter standing under a cold sky, counting the wounded, listening to the distant Commonwealth engines repositioning at the edge of our world. The night assault failed, but it confirmed what we already feared. Lance isn't aiming to negotiate our future. He's aiming to erase our ability to choose it. The next phase of the war arrives not with a larger army, but with a smaller lie, told louder. Lance reframes the conflict overnight. Commonwealth broadcasts label our alliance a destabilizing insurgency funded by outsider chaos. The words are carefully chosen to make ordinary citizens feel that autonomy is reckless, that resistance is childish, that surrender is maturity. But the spell is weakening. Inside the city, the Civic Council grows bolder, fueled by leaked reports and battlefield transcripts that reveal Lance's unauthorized escalation. Pamela's public image is now trapped in a narrowing corridor. If she defends Lance, she inherits his brutality. If she condemns him, she admits the structure allowed him to flourish. We seize that political paralysis. A sympathetic administrator smuggles us a command authorization file, stamped and signed, showing Lance has been operating beyond formal consent pathways. The language is technical enough to be boring, which is precisely why it's powerful. It isn't a rumor. It's a procedural paper trail that proves a power hijack. We distribute copies widely, not just to our people, but to Commonwealth units that still believe they serve ordered civilization. The message is simple. You are not enforcing peace. You are enforcing one man's expansion ambition. This triggers the shift we've been waiting for. Units begin requesting confirmation before advancing into civilian zones. Some delays are only minutes. Others stretch into full operational stalls. A few commanders refuse to proceed without written reassurance that their orders are lawful. The Loyalist wing senses the danger and begins operating more independently, like a state within a state. Lance, now cornered by both external resistance and internal legal erosion, switches to desperation tactics. He orders a push toward a key communications hub near the city perimeter, a facility that, if seized, would allow him to control regional messaging and isolate the Civic Council's influence. We plan to intercept, not for spectacle, for containment. Our team infiltrates the corridor under cover of routine cargo movement. Civilians sympathetic to our cause guide us through warehouse networks and service tunnels. A defected Commonwealth tech provides the hub's security rotation schedule. Another paper weapon, another crack in Lance's armor. The confrontation is fast. Loyalists arrive expecting minimal resistance. Instead, they find a coordinated ambush designed to disable vehicles, disrupt comms, and neutralize command nodes without turning the zone into a massacre. The fight is sharp, tense, and strategically restrained, because we know every civilian casualty would become a propaganda lifeline for Lance. We secure the hub, and inside the command office we find what feels like the next key to the finale, a signed contingency plan outlining a scenario where Lance attempts to seize emergency control if the governor formally moves to restrain him. It reads like a political coup in plain ink. We copy it immediately. Across the city, the Civic Council begins to mobilize legal action. Across our territories, the Alliance sharpens defenses. Across the Loyalist ranks, tension rises to a brittle edge. This is no longer a simple war of sides. It is a war of legitimacy inside a single civilization. As night falls, our scouts report Lance has begun consolidating his most loyal units near the heart of the city, positioning himself like a man preparing for a final gambit. He is running out of room, which means he is about to become more dangerous than ever. And we end this chapter with one hard truth. When an empire's enforcer starts fighting the empire's own rules, the final war isn't just coming. It has already entered the bloodstream. The Commonwealth's heart is no longer beating in rhythm. It's stuttering. After we seize the communications hub and circulate the contingency plan, the city's political atmosphere turns electric with quiet panic. The Civic Council can't pretend this is just unrest anymore. The paper trail is too clean, the signatures too real. Lance is not merely enforcing policy, he's preparing to override the chain of legitimacy itself. Pamela's public messaging shifts again, sharper and more defensive. She speaks about unity, about calming the city, about protecting the Commonwealth's image. But the absence of clarity is its own confession. When a government won't name its crisis, it usually means the crisis is sitting inside the throne room. Meanwhile, in the streets, citizens are changing shape. They are no longer asking whether corruption exists. They are asking why they were made to accept it. Worker-tier neighborhoods organize silent marches that become loud with numbers. Families of the reassigned demand official disclosure lists. A few former loyalists begin distributing our witness summaries openly, no longer afraid of being labeled destabilizers, because the real destabilizer now has a name. Lance tries to counter with speed. His loyalist clusters begin sweeping through districts at dawn, not to fight a war but to recover narrative control. They confiscate printed testimonies, raid suspected storage points, and detain key organizers under emergency clauses he's stretched to near absurdity. But every raid is now watched by a population that has tasted refusal. And something else begins to happen, something Lance cannot easily reverse. Soldiers start asking for written confirmation. Commanders begin hesitating before executing detentions. A handful of units quietly refuse to operate without clear legal authorization from the governor's office. The system is splitting under the weight of its own paperwork. Our resistance leadership meets in a secured, lower-tier warehouse, surrounded by maps, witness logs, and the last smoke-scented fragments of archives we saved. The plan aligns into a single, dangerous objective: remove the myth. Lance isn't just a man. He's the story that the Commonwealth still needs to believe to justify its own expansion. If he can be exposed in full view of the city, if his ambition can be shown as personal conquest rather than civic necessity, his power collapses faster than bullets can manage. We prepare a public truth strike. Not a rally this time, a broadcast. Using the hub we secured, our inside allies coordinate a narrow window to override official city feeds. We compile the most damning evidence into a short, structured reveal: annexation contracts, strike lists, emergency detention authorizations, and the contingency plan for seizing control if Pamela restrains him. We don't embellish. We let the documents speak. The broadcast goes live during a midday assembly event, when officials are most visible and citizen foot traffic is highest. People stop in streets. Markets freeze. Even a few soldiers pause to watch. For a brief, terrifying minute, the Commonwealth is forced to witness its own corruption as a unified audience. The reaction is immediate. The Civic Council begins issuing emergency deliberations. District commanders request direct clarification from the governor's chain, and Lance, who thrives in controlled ambiguity, must step into daylight. He doesn't respond with reassurance. He responds with movement. A loyalist extraction convoy forms near the administrative core, suggesting he's either preparing to flee or preparing to strike the council before it can act. We decide on a surgical capture, not for revenge, for containment of the entire system's collapse. A sympathetic security tech provides a fresh route schedule. Lance's private convoy path shifting toward the perimeter with minimal escort. The timing is tight. The window is narrow. We move with silent urgency. The city's future is now balanced on one question: will the Commonwealth remove its enforcer, or will the enforcer attempt to inherit the Commonwealth? The hunt for Lance doesn't feel like chasing a man. It feels like chasing the last lie holding the structure together. The convoy route cuts through a controlled corridor near the city's outer administrative belt. Industrial service roads, warehouses, and transitional zones where loyalist influence is strong but civilian presence is thinner. If we're going to intercept him without turning the streets into a massacre, this is our only clean angle. We assemble a mixed team: our core resistance fighters, 2 defected Commonwealth officers, and civilian logistics allies who know the movement patterns better than official maps ever could. The defected officers carry the weight of conscience. Men and women who once believed order could justify sacrifice, now forced to face the cost of that belief. The ambush is designed for restraint. Disable vehicles, cut comms, separate Lance from his escort. No spectacle, no public panic, just a decisive removal of the most destabilizing variable in the equation. When the convoy appears, it moves fast, cleaner than most military operations in the apocalypse. 2 lead vehicles, 1 central armored transport, 2 trailing units. We trigger the first trap. A road barrier drops into place from a previously rigged steel gate. The lead vehicle swerves and collides into a reinforced obstruction. The second attempts to flank but is forced into a tight choke where our team disables the engine with concentrated fire. The convoy stalls. The world holds its breath. Lance's security detail responds immediately, forming a protective ring around the central transport. They're trained, disciplined, and loyal enough to die for the narrative that kept them privileged. A brief firefight erupts, sharp, close, terrifyingly efficient. We take losses. So do they. But our defected officers do something critical. They shout legal counterorders into the chaos, using official command phrasing that forces hesitation among mixed authority troops. It's a psychological blade. For just seconds, that hesitation is enough. We breach the central transport. Lance isn't cowering. He's composed, furious, yes, but controlled. He speaks like a man who still believes this is a negotiation between rational adults. He offers a bargain so clean it almost sounds noble. He claims his actions were necessary, that without him the Commonwealth fractures into weak, sentimental factions. He promises stability in exchange for silence, safety in exchange for our complicity in his version of history. The offer is tempting in the way poison can be tempting when you're thirsty. We refuse, because peace built on silence is just a quieter cage. We restrain him and move fast, knowing loyalist reinforcements will arrive within minutes. The extraction route is pre-marked through service tunnels, connecting to lower-tier districts where civilian support is stronger and Commonwealth surveillance is less centralized. As we transport him, we feel the city's mood shifting in real time. News of the capture spreads ahead of us like a shockwave. Some citizens cheer, others panic, afraid that removing Lance will trigger total collapse. Soldiers at checkpoints receive conflicting orders. The chain of command buckles under its own unresolved loyalties. In the administrative corps, Pamela's advisors move quickly, urging her to publicly condemn Lance to preserve legitimacy. In loyalist pockets, whispers of retaliation spill into calls for a last stand. By the time we reach a secured holding location, the truth is unavoidable. Capturing Lance doesn't end the war, it changes the battlefield. Because now the Commonwealth must confront what it pretended not to see for too long. Was Lance a rogue enforcer, or the purest expression of what the system was always willing to become? And as the city braces for the political aftershock, we end this chapter with a new danger rising from the silence. When a tyrant is removed, the throne doesn't stay empty. It calls to everyone who thinks they deserve to inherit the fear. The night we capture Lance, the Commonwealth doesn't celebrate. It trembles. Because removing a man is easy compared to removing the system that made him inevitable. We keep him hidden at first, not out of mercy, but out of strategy. Loyalist cells are still active, still armed, still hungry for a story where they aren't villains. If we parade Lance too early, we risk turning him into a martyr for those who only understand order when it's delivered through fear. But secrecy has a cost. Rumors swell into dangerous versions of truth. Some say we executed him. Others say we struck a secret deal. The Commonwealth's citizens now live in the vacuum between what they suspect and what they fear to confirm. So we choose daylight. A civic council, newly emboldened by the evidence we've leaked and the visible fractures inside the army, issues an official arrest warrant under Transitional Emergency Authority. The document is symbolic as much as legal. It says something the old Commonwealth couldn't say without choking on its own pride. The system is no longer above accountability. We escort Lance to a secured public tribunal corridor near the administrative core. It's not grand. It's not ceremonial. It's a controlled, tense march through streets crowded with citizens who don't know whether they're about to witness justice or the first spark of civil collapse. The Loyalists strike anyway, not with a full assault, with a surgical attempt to disrupt the transfer. Shots crack from elevated positions. Smoke canisters roll into the street. A sudden push of chaos aims to break the convoy long enough for Lance to disappear back into the shadows. But something has changed since the square and the border war. Commonwealth soldiers who once would have obeyed Loyalist commands without thought now hesitate. Some move to shield civilians instead of advancing on us. A few even turn their weapons toward the attackers. The system is no longer united by fear. It is divided by conscience. The firefight is brief but brutal. 2 of our people go down. One of the defected officers takes a hit protecting a group of unarmed citizens who would have been collateral a week ago. That moment matters, because it tells the crowd that this struggle was never about outsiders chasing power. It was about stopping power from devouring everyone it could reach. We push through the smoke and reach the tribunal perimeter with Lance still in custody. The civic council members appear in public for the first time in days. Their faces are tight with the weight of history. They stand beside restructured security units, an emerging new command that answers to civic oversight rather than personal loyalty. Lance is informed of the charges. He doesn't look shocked. He looks offended. He tries to reframe everything as necessity and leadership. He claims he carried the burden of civilization when others hesitated. He insists expansion was moral duty, not ambition. But the Commonwealth has seen the documents. It has seen the bodies. It has lived the manipulation. His words hit the air and fall flat. Then Pamela's name enters the tribunal like a ghost with a crown. The crowd demands accountability beyond the enforcer. They demand to know who authorized the system that allowed this. The Civic Council doesn't answer fully yet, but their silence is no longer protective. It is transitional. As the tribunal adjourns under heavy security, loyalist factions begin retreating into smaller, desperate territories of influence. Their cohesion is dissolving, because the myth of Lance the Untouchable has been broken, and in the crack where that myth once lived, a new reality begins to breathe. The Commonwealth might survive, but only if it finally admits what it became. Victory doesn't arrive with fireworks. It arrives with paperwork, grief, and the terrifying weight of responsibility. The Commonwealth enters a transitional phase that feels almost more dangerous than open war. When a system built on careful hierarchy loses its central enforcer, the void becomes a magnet for panic. Citizens want certainty. Soldiers want clear command. Our own alliance wants guarantees that the Commonwealth won't simply replace Lance with another smiling version of the same machine. Pamela tries to contain the collapse by offering a clean narrative. She positions Lance as a rogue actor who exceeded the spirit of her governance. She speaks of regret, of rebuilding trust, of returning the Commonwealth to its original ideals. The tone is calm, the language is practiced. But no one forgets the emergency orders, no one forgets the annexation contracts, and no one believes a single man built an empire of fear without a structure willing to benefit from it. The Civic Council moves first. They draft a transitional charter, temporary governance terms that place military authority under civilian oversight, limit emergency detention powers, and establish independent review of reassignment cases. The charter is circulated publicly, not hidden. It is intentionally readable, intentionally human, because the Commonwealth's survival now depends on visible humility. We push for one essential addition, a shared governance model that includes our allied communities as equals, not annexed territories, not subordinate partners, equals. The negotiations are tense. Some Commonwealth elites resist, believing the city's legitimacy depends on preserving its old social tiers. Our leaders resist the opposite fear, that accepting any centralized structure will eventually rebuild the same empire under a new slogan. We meet in a cold administrative hall with sunlight streaming in through clean windows that feel almost insulting after so much bloodshed. The discussions are not idealistic, they are practical. Food distribution, border security, legal accountability, the formation of a mixed provisional council with rotating leadership slots. This is the unglamorous architecture of peace. Outside, loyalist cells attempt to reignite instability with targeted sabotage. Small bombings, arson at supply depots, threats against council members. The tactic is clear. If they can make reform look fragile, they can convince citizens that authoritarian stability was safer. But citizens are different now. They organize neighborhood watches. They report loyalist staging points. They protect public record centers where the new reassignment reviews are being processed. For the first time, the people become the system's immune response. That doesn't erase the pain. We hold funerals. We count names. We rebuild homes in places that still smell faintly of smoke. We confront the crushing emotional truth that no new charter can resurrect the ones we lost. But the charter does something equally important. It declares that those losses mattered. that they will not be filed into silence. In the final meeting of this chapter, the Transitional Council confirms Lance will face public trial under the new oversight structure. The announcement is brief, but the significance is enormous. It signals that the Commonwealth is no longer built on the untouchability of power. It is trying, finally, to be built on accountability. As we leave the hall, a quiet warning arrives from a scout on the outer perimeter. Loyalist remnants are contacting unknown groups beyond the region, searching for allies. The war may be shifting roads rather than ending. And as I watch the city lights settle into a calmer pattern for the first time in what feels like a lifetime, I understand the real cliff edge of this moment. We didn't just overthrow an enforcer, we inherited the responsibility of preventing the system from growing another one. Peace doesn't arrive like a sunrise. It arrives like a bruise, tender, discolored, and proof that something terrible finally stopped hitting. The guns are quieter now. Patrol boots sound different too, less like a threat, more like a habit that hasn't yet learned to relax. The Commonwealth is still standing, but it no longer feels like the same polished machine that marched into our lands certain it could catalog us into obedience. Now it feels like a place waking up with blood on its hands and no idea how to wash it off. Reconstruction begins in uneven patches. In the city, worker-tier districts finally receive more than ration crates and speeches. Walls are repaired, clinics are expanded, schools reopen with lessons that include, not erase, the last years of war and manipulation. The new Provisional Council orders a full review of reassignment cases. Families queue outside administrative buildings, clutching files, photographs, anything that might prove who they lost and why. Outside the walls, our settlements rebuild with a new kind of vigilance. We reinforce our own defenses, not against walkers this time, but against the idea that safety can ever again be outsourced to someone else's banner. Trade routes reopen, but they're built on negotiation, not dictate. For the first time, supply travels both ways without an army escorting its shadow. Justice becomes its own slow battlefield. Lance sits in a fortified holding block, no longer the man who snapped his fingers and reordered lives, but a detainee waiting for a trial he never imagined could exist. The hearings are methodical. Witnesses testify. Documents are presented. The new legal framework is clumsy sometimes, contradictory often, but it's trying to do something this world nearly forgot how to do: separate punishment from revenge. Pamela isn't spared either. She's not thrown in a cell, but she's dragged into the light she spent years directing from a distance. The council questions her publicly about what she knew, when she knew it, and how many of Lance's actions were convenient to ignore when they kept her world stable. Her answers are carefully measured, occasionally sincere, often evasive. The people listen, not with blind rage, but with a tired, sharp understanding. No one builds an empire of fear alone. Parallel to the trials, we build something we should have had long before the Commonwealth ever found us. An archive, not the kind that can lock truth in a room and then burn the building. This one is distributed, multiple locations, multiple custodians, multiple safeguards. We compile annexation contracts, emergency orders, strike logs, trial transcripts, and handwritten witness testimonies into a living record. Every community gets a copy. Every school will eventually teach from it. The message is simple. We will not allow anyone to say, "No one knew," ever again. Life, somehow, creeps back between the cracks of all this reckoning. Children play in corridors that once echoed with marching boots. Markets swell with the noisy chaos of bargaining instead of curated calm. A few Commonwealth soldiers, now under civic command, sit at makeshift tables with our people, learning the names of the towns they almost conquered. But healing isn't clean. Some families can't forgive. Some settlements will never fully trust a city that once measured them like resources. Some former loyalists walk with the haunted eyes of people trying to live in a world where their excuses no longer hold. At night, when the generators hum and the world feels briefly smaller, messages arrive from the perimeter scouts. They talk about scattered loyalist remnants slipping away into the far reaches, about strange groups watching from ridgelines and vanishing before patrols can make contact, about radio frequencies carrying fragments of unfamiliar codes. The war with the Commonwealth might be ending, but the world beyond our maps didn't stop evolving while we were busy surviving each other. As we file the latest testimony into the archive and lock the room that holds these fragile papers, one thought refuses to leave. We finally claimed the right to write our own history. Now we have to survive long enough to keep anyone else from stealing the pen. There's a moment standing on a hill outside the rebuilt settlement when the world feels almost quiet. Not safe, never safe, but balanced. The Commonwealth has changed. Not enough to be called pure, but enough to be called possible. The Provisional Council, once a desperate stopgap, now functions with something resembling rhythm. Military power is chained to civic oversight. Reassignment programs are frozen pending full review. Expansion decrees are torn up in public squares. The banners flying over the city mean something different now. They're not just symbols of control. They're proof that an empire can be forced to kneel to its own people. Our communities are no longer outposts on someone else's map. We're signatories to a new alliance charter, a web of equal settlements and the reformed Commonwealth, bound by shared defense, shared resources, and most importantly, shared accountability. No unit moves without consensus. No aid arrives without transparency. Every decision leaves a paper trail meant to be read, not hidden. We seal the archive, not as a tomb, but as a heartbeat in ink. The final dossier, the compiled contracts, decrees, testimonies, orders, battlefield reports, and trial records, is split into several complete copies. One remains in the city, others